Okay, guys, so before we look at TYU 1 and 2 in the textbook, I want to now kind of illustrate what I was talking about in part 2 and part 3. And I mean, you'll have all this as well, but I think it's just to kind of try and conceptualize it again, make it a bit more real for you, sort of see what's going on. So initially, I started off with this idea of this. I sort of went through what was going on here, where you had a parent company buying a subsidiary, and so we had that's the investment of 50, and this was a straightforward where there was you were paying exactly what you should have been paying for the subsidiary. And illustration 2 literally just shows us putting the addition together where we eliminated the investment. So don't ever forget that this is, but you even if you do, you after a few exercises you won't anymore, but you have literally just journaled out. That is the journal, really. Ultimately, that's the ultimate journal. So if you're doing this at work, that's your first journal ultimately, and then you're bringing everything in. But I'm sure now there's software that probably does this automatically, I imagine. So illustration 1, so this is part 2. We then brought everything in and drew all that up together. We have this over here, and we discussed that. Now, what we now have here is, I mean, I've only just developed this illustration 1 a little bit, and I think, let me see, I think what I have done is tried to, no, I haven't. So if you look here, let's just look at what this looked at like before. So here, we had 60, 50, 40, making 150, right? So the same scenario, the subsidiaries are the same, but all I've done is I've just changed the number here. So here I'm arguing or creating the impression that instead of you paying 50, you had paid 70. So you see here, I mean, it's still balancing at 150. So I'm saying you basically paid an extra 20. So your bank technically, it has gone down by 20 more because you paid an extra 70. I don't know, you were desperate for the thing, so you went for it and you paid 70. So your initial journal, when you bought this thing, was, if you like, debit, investment, and credit, bank 70 and 70. So you paid 70 for this thing here that's still worth physically 50, yes? Which is the argument here. So this is this discussion about goodwill, right? Ultimately, you see, because you see, when we discuss working 2, this here is working 2 initially at acquisition. That's what we're seeing here at working 2. It's sort of saying, okay, that's the 50. We're starting here. Okay, and then everything that happens after that, we have year end, and then we can then compare, right? So, but this time you paid 70 for something that was worth 50. So don't think, oh my goodness, why would you do that? Well, you would if you wanted something desperately. So in effect, what have I written here? P has acquired 100% of the shares in S at a cost of $70,000. You paid more. So now let's look at this. You paid more. So this is what you did. So again, sorry, I'm just repeating myself. You paid more. There we are. You paid more than the actual physical worth of the business. This investment of 70,000 is made up of. Yes, it's made up of. Technically, what you've done is it's made up of 90,000 pounds worth of non-current. Sorry, of assets, and 40,000 worth of liability, and if you like, an extra. You basically paid for an extra asset, if you like, of 20,000. Right, and so ultimately what you paid for was this goodwill. That's where the goodwill really is. I mean, you can sort of see where I'm going. So what's the argument here? Now, I'm sure I'm going to say it over and over again, but because we're going to be bringing in or importing, think of it as an import, importing the A and L of the subsidiary, which are 90 and 40, well, we'll have a problem, because if you just bring those in as they are, you have to replace 70. That's not going to work. So the way I like to do it or think about it so that you can see is that ultimately this 70 here, we have to show 70 because we can't, because it's an investment, we're not allowed to show it separately, the fact that we paid more, right? Because it's an investment and it's the standard doesn't let us do it. But now that we're actually buying something, or we're consolidating, just to show you literally what you've really done ultimately is, well, you bought 2 assets, really, right? You bought goodwill, which is an intangible. You have the investment in the physical assets, and then you paid 70,000. That's what you did ultimately. So really, we have this intangible already sitting outside. I mean, this is the journal entry. All that I'm doing in working three is just a working procedure, but conceptually, if you can see it, you now know what I'm paying for. I'm just showing or separating out that goodwill, right? Ultimately, this is what I paid for. So right now, I'm showing it as 70,000, the whole thing as investment, but ultimately, what I'm really doing is splitting this up into two parts. And I have 20 here, 50 here, and I have 70 here. So you've paid more than the actual physical worth of the business. So the investment of 70,000 is made up of this and this and this. So I've talked about that already. So what does this now? What does this now look like? So, oh yes, I do have it here. So what you now have here is that this is what you had. Great. And then you see me now moving across and sort of replacing it, making it look like this. Yes. So you now have 60 and you have the intangible 20, you have the investment in S at cost. I mean, that's still an investment in S, but and then everything. So everything kind of looks, this is what we look like. Now we can do this sort of fancy consolidation where we now replace this 50 with, if you like, the 90 and the 40. Yeah, so what IFRS is in effect telling us to do is to replace our investment, journal 1A of 50 with the physical assets of 90 and 40, but I can do that now. That makes sense naturally, right? Because I've separated out the intangible goodwill. So what will I now have? So that, yeah, that's what I've done. So I'm taking that out, um, taken out the investment of 50 and replaced it. But in effect, I've just separated out the 20, right? And that's kind of the argument here. So therefore, what I do now have is, and I'm going to do it. Why not? Let's just do it over here because this is a good. So I'm just going to do my new consolidated P consolidated P consolidated. Yeah, let's do that over here. So I'm bringing everything in. I'm just going to use my whatever, just do that very quickly. 60 plus 50, and I have that over there. I have, well, typically goodwill comes out and sits. So I'm just going to put the goodwill here. I'm just going to call this 20. That's the goodwill sitting on its own. I'm just going to call that goodwill, right? I'm just going to, so just pretend, I mean, this is the new layout here. So I don't like putting goodwill underneath. I like putting goodwill above non-current assets. But okay, you know what? I'm just going to leave it as it is so that it's in line. So I have there, and that's the 20, right? So now again, this disappears. This is gone, right? Because it's not. Let me see. Will this allow me to do this? Oh, good. It's allowing me to do this. So good. So it's no longer there because I'm replacing it, if you like, with the bringing in the non-current assets as I did in illustration one, right? Of course. And then current assets 20 plus 40, and that's coming in at 60. And then we do our thing and we bring that down, and then we have that. Okay, brilliant. Then we have here just the share capital of the parent, right? And then we have the retained earnings of the parent, and then we bring in the current liabilities. Oops, sorry, don't do that. Just do it yourself. We have that, and then we have that. We have that again. So nicely matching, bold border the thing over there. Bold border the thing over there, and then we have that. Bold. Where are we? Here we are. Great. Yes, exactly. So we now see this consolidation taking place, and we now see clearly this goodwill, and that's how we calculate goodwill. Now, just to sort of say, if during the year, as you can imagine, just jumping the gun a little, goodwill impairs, all you simply have is whatever you'll have a journal, whatever credit goodwill, which is what we were seeing earlier on, right? Credit goodwill with I don't know whatever five, and therefore you would also have to debit the retained earnings of this parent by five as well, as you would expect, right? This is nothing absurd. That's what working three really looks at, how we calculate this. Cool, great stuff. Yes, I'll end this video there and we'll look at the final illustration, which is when we have a non-controlling interest and the mechanics or the conceptual mechanics of what's really going on.